Section 26, Presumption of Mental Soundness. What I pointed out convinced Mrs. Abiola that she could neither press charges nor sue the police. But then, she decided to take advantage of my knowledge of the criminal laws of Lagos State to solve a problem. It involved her uncle, Mr. Kunle Akorede, who was currently detained at the State Criminal Investigation Department (SCID) for conspiracy and murder. Mrs. Abiola lamented that since she could not press charges, given our conduct, we at least owed her an apology, and that if I helped her with the case, we could call it even. I smiled and agreed to her proposal. The next day, I accompanied her to see her uncle at SCID. Her uncle took his time to explain why he was being detained with a murder charge hanging around his neck. He told me he ran a registered company called Get Help. It was a private firm that helped their clients source for workers and sometimes trained these workers on behalf of their clients. He stated that his company was just a go-between the people that needed workers as well as those that needed the work. The job that landed him in this mess was that of Mrs. Agnes Daramola, a woman in her late 60s. She needed a house help, and he told her to give him 1 month to process her request. The old lady selected a girl from a list of 6 girls of the same age. Her name was Chioma. Mrs. Daramola insisted she wanted Chioma to begin work immediately. Tall and fair in complexion, Chioma was a pretty 21-year-old girl from the southeast. Mrs. Daramola's reason for wanting Chioma to start work immediately was because her children had relocated to the United States and she had a little boy to care for. One of her daughter's kids, born out of wedlock, had been left behind with her to care for. The daughter had remarried and gone to the US with her new husband. As it happened, the old lady wanted to be free to live her life like some teenager, and she felt the 3-year-old boy was holding her back from clubbing and catching fun with her friends. So, she needed a house help quickly. Mr. Kunle insisted Mrs. Daramola give him at least a month to study the house help's conduct before allowing her to commence work in Mrs. Daramola's place. He wanted to ensure the lady he eventually chose was of good conduct and would not cause problems for the old lady or her little grandson. But Mrs. Daramola insisted that Chioma should start work as soon as possible. After much persuasion, Mr. Kunle agreed to her request and personally drove Chioma to her house. But after a few months, the old lady noticed some injuries on the body of her grandson, and when she asked Chioma about it, she claimed the boy fell down the stairs while playing with his toys. Mrs. Daramola believed her and moved on till her daughter came back to Nigeria to spend some time with her son. When she saw the scars on her son's body, she became suspicious and decided to take him to the hospital. After a thorough examination, the family doctor stated that he had complained that he suspected the child was being abused at home. But Mrs. Daramola had dismissed his suspicion. On hearing this, the boy's mother became furious. She went back home and confronted her mother with this information, but she got no concrete answers as to what had happened to her son. So she decided to install CCTV in strategic areas of the house where the boy spent most of his time. She monitored the footage for a month, but nothing out of the ordinary happened. She was about removing the CCTV when everything changed. One fateful morning, after returning from a church vigil, she learned her son had been rushed to the hospital. When she got there, she was directed to the ICU. She met her son unconscious. The boy was suffering from multiple concussions. The doctors did their best to stabilize him, but eventually the boy died. She screamed as she held the lifeless body of her son. Enveloped by rage, she demanded to know where Chioma was. Chioma was placed under arrest because Mrs. Daramola had seen her holding the boy with his bloodstains on the wall. When the police viewed the CCTV footages, they were forced to come to the conclusion that something was fundamentally wrong with Chioma. 1 minute, she was normal, and the next minute, she turned into some mad woman. 1 minute, she was seated, feeding the boy. The next minute, she snapped and started hitting the boy's head against the wall. The IPO arrested Mr. Kunle because he felt Mr. Kunle should have ensured Chioma was mentally sound before employing her. This was because Chioma's family eventually confessed she had a history of temporary insanity. I took my time to educate the IPO that if Mr. Kunle had been aware of her mental condition, he would at least have been charged for manslaughter. That is, if the murder charge did not stick. But Mr. Kunle had presumed Chioma was of sound mind. I pointed out Section 26 of the Criminal Laws of Lagos State 2015, Presumption of Mental Soundness, which states that every person is presumed to be of sound mind and to have been of sound mind at any relevant time until the contrary is proved. I added that Mrs. Daramola did not allow Mr. Kunle to complete his inquiries, which would have enabled him prove the contrary.
This work of fiction is a production of COSPEAKS, composed and written by Chidi Okoye, narrated by Ikenna Igwe, sound production by Glaze Entertainment, graphics by Illustroking Creatives, video production by Chachi World Entertainment, video editing by Steveni Beleche Triple Nolly TV, technical support by Kings Media. Thank you for viewing.